Next, we have on the docket Tim Vlamis, yes, my brother. And Tim, you're going to talk about, I think, data visualization, something that's near and dear to both of our hearts. And give us a little preview, if you would, of what you're going to be talking about at the conference.
Yeah, so thanks, Dan. Indeed, we're going to be talking about data visualization using Oracle Analytics and covering a lot of different topics and a lot of different examples. It'll be a combination of Dan, Jonathan Clark, and me. So we'll probably even disagree some in front of each other, as we usually do.
We tend to interrupt each other whenever we present together.
Yeah,
fun that way.
That's what happens with brothers. So overall, what we're going to be using is kind of this model that suggests that what we have are different requirements, different perspectives on how we design dashboards and how we think about them. And so there's a strong need. Of course, content is king. Always we're trying to share data objectively so that people get actionable insights from them. And the way they get those insights is by doing comparisons. And so comparisons become very important so that we have, a context, if you will, for that particular content. So these three in the top work very, very closely together so that we can reveal some type of decision that someone from looking at the dashboard, wants to make. Equally important is choice. So what we find is people that interact with dashboards tend to engage with them much more, tend to get a lot more value out of them. And so when they're able to make choices, particularly through filters and through drills and through hovers and things like that, that greatly raises their engagement level. Now, categorization is a little bit about the organizational strategy that you use when you're designing your dashboards. And we do have some hints and some tips, some frameworks on how to think about and organize these very, very large, complex data models that we tend to see in enterprise. And then connection really gets to drill paths and how we navigate through these dashboard systems. So with that, Dan, if it's all right, I'm just going to share an example.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a heads up. We're going to ask you if you're going to be attending the conference. We're getting a poll ready so stick around for that, but keep going, Tim.
Yeah. So this is an example of a dashboard that we've created, as this is actually just one piece of it. We have a lot of different tabs on here, but what we're looking at is we're looking at a company that has products in three different categories: technology, office supplies, and furniture. And in particular, we want to look at profitability. So what we're diving into here is which of these product categories and which of these products are contributing significantly to the profit or the bottom line of the firm. Now, and so usually in dashboards, we have a combination of visualizations. Here we have a bar graph, that just gives the summary information about the categories. We have a table that lists the actual profit and sales for the product categories and the product subcategories and whatnot, so that you can scroll down and look up specific line items. And then we have these scatter plots where, typically what we'll do is we'll put, the dependent variable and the independent variable on different axes where, our independent variable typically goes on the X, dependent on the Y. So we're looking here, we're looking at profitability as it varies by sales. So sales is a given and profit is what's varying. So that way we can know, for sales volume, where do we expect profitability to be, and where do these different products land within that scatter plot. And here we're looking at the profit ratio, or the profit margin, if you will, as it varies by profitability as a discrete amount, so that we can get a sense of, how much profit these products are contributing, or in this case, negative profit, and then what that ratio is, to sales. So these combination of views can start to help us identify outliers and get some insights. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about choice, and one of the things that we'll be highlighting in the presentation, is where do you put your filters? And so here, this is typically what we might find, where if we also have some customers who's buying the products, we want to be able to interrogate that and whatnot. You might see this as the product categories are here in drop downs, but what we find is, and we put the customer segments up here, what we find actually is kind of a recommendation is that we would flip-flop these and actually organize our customer information over here on the left and put our product category, subcategory, product name, filter choices on the top, and then facilitate. You turn on the use a graph as a filter, so that if we wanted to interrogate just technology, we can do that simply by using the graphs as choices, okay? And that way we will kind of reveal the insight for the categories without even having to work with these choices here and have them drop down. So this is something here, we're actually using a list on the left so that we can make a choice if we want to look at our customer segments, for example, and we want to look at the intersection of, okay, what are our consumers choosing? Again, we have this as a list, as a filtering device, so that we can make a choice and we can see all of these at the same time. We also have the ability to put drop downs in the canvases as well. Sometimes people like, the drop down prompt view. What we find is with large lists, they work pretty well. With smaller lists, we're far better off using a list view as we have here, so that you can see all your choices at once.
So I want to point out that often people think in terms of data visualization via the vises themselves. This gets into the layout of the actual canvases, of the dashboards, all that type of stuff. It even gets into what measures do you use, for instance, the scatter plots that Tim's showing on that. What measure do you use is the X and Y axes of these. It's not just what colors do you use, it's how do you lay it out on the screen, and that greatly affects the perceptions that people get from looking at the data.
Yeah, I would also say we kind of jumped into the middle of the presentation. So there are a number of summary canvases we have in advance. So once we kind of get into this product profitability type view, we're actually looking at, a richer visualization, so that we'll feel free to add context, like what are the sales for the different profitability contribution levels, things like that, and scatter plots and some more advanced visualizations. One of the things that that's an alternative is, actual placement of the the visualizations. One of the other, is what do we do with color? So if we want to highlight these segments and differentiate and point out which customer is actually in which segment, we can add color to this. Now this, Dan, gets into—
Really?
Yeah. So this is a trade-off, okay? So what we're doing here is we're calling strong visual attention to this customer segment and this customer name, so that as we're, working with these different products and we want to find out, oh, which one did, Kelly Burton purchase, and it's up here, we can find that, we can find it's in the middle here, or Andrew Levine right here. We can find those things visually quite quickly, even though when we have a very, dense graph. Obviously, if we just filter it to consumers, we're all going to get all our only consumers, and we don't have as many members in the scatter plots. But so what we'll talk about is it worth the visual energy it takes to use the colors over here? That is a design choice, that we often wrestle with and are looking to start to understand. So here we can see that, what we have is a bar chart that can also act as a filter. So if we want to look at consumers, we can actually see, okay, profitability, how much do they have? What are the different categories of segments, and what are the different products within those segments? So the other thing we like is when we do get questions from the audience about, why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? What is this showing? Those kinds of issues are a lot of fun to discuss in a group. And what we find is it's often similar to the kinds of questions we get, in actual client engagements, so that, kind of everybody shares in that. What choices are we making? What trade-offs are we making when we make those choices? And how do you present alternatives so that we get different views and we understand the trade-offs that exist between them?
So, Tim, quick question or other comment on the trade-offs and so on. The one thing we often have to work through with graphs is that, what do you do when you have a lot of data? Like, how do you visualize it on screen in a way that's meaningful? And it kind of came through in many things that you said, like you don't have a very long list, and you don't use too many colors. Like if we use like a dozen colors, then it loses its the impact. So I wondered whether you have any other insights on how you grapple with that, taking lots of data but making it, summarizing it well. So with the trade-offs with some trade-offs, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks, Helly. It's a great question. And what we find is certain graphs are better at displaying large numbers of elements. So if we look at the scatter plot for example, this can show many data points. And really what we're looking at is we're looking at the distribution of them and for outliers and whatnot, so that, other types of graphs also do very well with large amounts of data. Some graphs don't. Pie graphs, they're good for, some people say don't ever use them. There are a lot of problems with pie graphs, but any more than what you fingers on one hand, numbers of pieces, you really don't get a useful insight from them. So it really depends on the graph style, why you're using it, where you're using it. For example, and there are a number of issues related to human cognition, interpretation of the data itself from the graph that we have to be aware of. So something like a tree map may be good for a navigation aid. So that tree map shows different size rectangles or squares related to the data size. So we could do that with this if we took away one measure. But what happens is, the way the brain processes size and position is not well represented in the tree map. So
I'll also add on, Tim and Melly, that I just saw a feature that's in the OAC recent release where we can control the dot size on maps. And that will enable us to use maps to display. It's very effective. I think it was Philippe that showed in a recent demo, if you make the dot size real small, you can show lots and lots of data as points on a map. It's very effective to show that type of stuff in handling large amounts of data. And that one feature of being able to control the dot size really helps us with that. Otherwise, it just gets overwhelmed.
Yeah, so for example, if we change to a bar graph on this, we're going to find that we lose some of our, our ability to see the real distribution of this data along this particular axis of profit. And what we should do is take off sales so that we're only looking at one measure, So that's kind of how we start to learn how to remove sales to tooltip. And now we can start to get a sense of the distribution, but we have too many products here, and there are many, many more lines than we have listings. So it becomes problematic just because of the sheer number of members of the set. So yeah, it's a challenge. Thanks for bringing it up. All right, so Dan, I think we'll look forward to a great session and lots of good questions.
Well, thanks, Tim. Appreciate you running through all this. Pause for just a moment, and then I want to let's see.